like you're on the stand in court now. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Oh, let's not have that.
This is John's day. This is for John. But I wanted to share with everybody here this photo right here that I just found this week. Is John is in that excavator, and that is the first scoop out of our gravel plant that we have been extracting from since 2008. So John had that honor, and he's been on that machine and various others since he broke ground on that property. So it's a pretty special photo for me and him. As I said, this is for John. This is a toast for his retirement. Mr. Martell, there's only a handful of people I know that I can still remember the very first encounter with him in detail. And you're one of them. And I bet you're not yet sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It was Tuesday at Whitehall's in August of 1993. Our operation at that time was on the other side of Sugar Street than where we are now. We were a sand and gravel operation and still did a fair amount of roadway excavation work. I was in my early 30s and was managing the excavation division. My father, Ron, called me into his office and handed me an employment application. And he said something to me that he had never done before. He told me what I should do. And my father didn't do that type of thing. He said, this application is so impressive, I want you to go talk to him and hire him. You need help like this guy has. I walked out into the lobby of our new office alongside the railroad, and John was sitting on the right side of the entry door in our office lobby. Of course, with his flannel shirt on, that he probably still owns.
He's got one in the truck.
That's probably it. I introduced myself and said, let's have a chat. Just like that, without checking references, Mr. Martell was hired and spent nearly 3 decades with us. That was a lucky day for me in Whitehall Court ages ago. Speed forward nearly 30 years to this week. I was mowing a 5-acre hayfield Tuesday afternoon, and I began to think of all the years working with John, thinking, what am I going to miss most about him? Well, that thought process lasted until I was done mowing 2 hours later. I'm going to try to share with you some of that internal dialogue I had with myself. My first thoughts was towards what caught my father's eyes on his employment application. And it was this. Recently retired from the United States Air Force 6 months previously. So he had just retired, and within 6 months he was out looking for another job. His military training, was heavy equipment operator. Throughout his time at Whitehall Corporations, John's talents with any piece of heavy equipment was way above average, and in a very limited top-tier class of operators. As I was pondering those in this top-tier class of operators that I had the privilege to work with or be around in my 45 years at Whitehall Corporation, I realized a common trait they all had. It was just not the hand-eye communication skills that are simple baseline one-on-one equipment skills. It was more than that. Mr. Martell understood in his mind what the site should look like at the end of each day. He was good at it, way better than most, at seeing grades and tying grades and topo lines together. If you do not take the time to learn that, it doesn't matter if you can operate the controls of the machine or not. Knowing what to do with the machine is what separates the cowboys from the real operators. As I was still mowing back and forth and pondering these things, I again realized it was not just that John was a well-trained operator, or that he also had an eye for topo lines and tying together in his head and found directions for others. And John was in this upper tier for an additional reason. What many others often miss to be a member of this upper tier talent is this: one must take pride in your work. And John did that. He didn't half-ass things. Or have the attitude that's good enough for who it's for and what it's for. John took the skill set of being a trained operator with great hand-eye coordination and his ability to see and tie grates together, and then layered onto that this thing called pride. A thing that some have and some don't. The ones that lack that trait don't make it to being a master at the trade. Some might call this, as I sometimes do, they just don't give a shit. Good enough for who it's for, too bad it's 3:45 and time to leave. I can tell you Mr. Martell gave it shit every single day. I saw it every time I was around what John had done that day. It was obvious that he was a top-tier operator because of these traits that made him a master of his trade. He was proud of his work as if it had his name on it. As I continued mowing in a circle, I continued to pondering other experience with Mr. Martell, thinking what else I missed. Something else came to mind. Over the years, I have fielded complaints from other employees about John. Imagine that. These complaints were mostly centered towards Martell's and milking the time clock. Or that he spends more time on the job than anyone else, as if he was doing it only to increase his paycheck while not also being productive on the job site. Early on, I wondered whether these complaints were valid, or were they coming from the typical bellyachers that complain about everything and anything and trying to make themselves look better. I found out most of the time these were coming from the bellyachers of that month. Something that I recognize more quickly nowadays. But over the years, I watched John and others almost in comparison at times. It was clear to me that John also took exceptional care of his machine, again to a degree above the typical average operator. In the mornings and most of the time, starting the day ahead of others, he would methodically check out his unit, and I do not mean a quick dipstick pull and an engine start. He would put his machine first, as if it was his own personal vehicle. If he couldn't address the issue, he would call for help and make sure it got done and fixed. He would never be neglected. During the workday, and most of the time without direction from me, he would do his job, site grading to a higher level than most others, with less input from me. At the end of the workday, he would stay until the site he was working on was graded and compacted, where things were in order and prepped for the next workday. If the machine needed a little extra love at the end of the day, John would stay and do it. When John had a 20-year-old service truck, that truck inside and out was kept clean and organized as if it was his own vehicle. So I learned not to buy into those accusations many years ago. I prefer your type of professional work ethic, sir. Mr. Martell, even though you do not know it, I went to bat for you many times on occasions like this. As I was now near done mowing, I was trying to stop thinking about these things. But again, something else popped into my internal thoughts. It was this. In my 45 years at White Corporation, I have witnessed staff or teams that work well together. I've also witnessed staff or teams that do not. I realized this was mainly caused by negative words and unbased accusations towards other team members. I learned later on Martell stays out of this type of negative personal gossip towards others. But I do also know that when he sees a problem, he calls it out directly to that person, eyeball to eyeball. Not as unbased accusations, rather to call a spade a spade. Frankly, something I should have been doing more often as a coach. Mr. Martell, there is nothing I can say or suggest that I wish you would have been better at. And honestly, I can not even say that about myself, as I know my shortcomings are well. Mr. Martell, you will be sorely missed, and sir, you're replaceable. If you ever need anything or want to play in the dozer again, please let me know. You're always welcome. Don't be a stranger. I wish you in your second retirement enjoyable times ahead. Here's a toast to you, sir.
For he's a jolly good fellow.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for putting up with me for all these years. I wish it wasn't me.
Yeah, there were a few of them.
But I thought about going with these.
We got our windows down, driving down the 405, sing along to the radio. We're gonna make it someday, nothing's gonna get in our way. We will be the biggest band in town. Round and round the world we'll go, putting on the greatest show. So make sure that you don't miss out, just be there. We're taking our shot, bring what you got. We're going all the way to the top. We will hear the sound of 1 million people screaming our names when we're backstage. We'll play loud, surfing the crowd.